Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Caitanya-caritāmṛta reading and discussion this evening with the Prabhupada Disciples Association. We're a global network of devotees of like-minded focus. We see Prabhupada present in his Vani incarnation, his sound vibration, which is, according to Shastra, the ideal way to associate with the pure devotee of Krishna through his words, his instructions, his books, his lectures, and the association of like-minded devotees who are focused on his service and delivering his message of Krishna consciousness to everyone they meet. This is the greatest need in the modern world is the lack of Krishna consciousness that exists, and to supply that information to people. Here in Canada these days, there's a campaign for mental illness to help people that are mentally sick with some kind of therapy. And it's interesting to note that most people do not understand what is the subtle body of the conditioned soul. The subtle body is the mind, the intelligence, the false ego, Krishna within the heart as the super soul, and the individual Jivatma, the soul. This is, Prabhupada introduced this understanding to the Western world when he came from India in 1965. And unfortunately, at this point in time, very few people have been able to understand what is the mind. And I think all of us are aware of this. We all live in the state of the mind, mentally thinking this, that, all kinds of connection with Maya. This is the main business of the conditioned soul. And on many different levels, the engagement of the mind is the focal point of the living entity, their main focus. Not a transcendental focus, which is the state of mind of a real devotee of Krishna. And Krishna consciousness is a solution for that, how to transcend the living in the mind and come to the transcendental platform of service to Krishna as the main focus. And always thinking of ways and means to spread Krishna consciousness in their own particular area. This is the idea of the classes that we are conducting, is to help people in our group become enthused to carry on with their preaching work in their own particular areas. This is not a centralized organization based on profit, adoration, and distinction. This is an association of devotees that are coming together with a common interest in discussing Krishna consciousness, philosophy in association with other devotees. And this was the program that Prabhupada introduced for us in the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. So we're very happy that you're all present here today as a Sankirtan session to bring about a further understanding of why we are here in this world and what we hope to achieve through the spiritual association of other devotees. This is part of the Krishna conscious philosophy that we practice. This is not an impersonal group, but it's actually a very personal group. And as we progress along, we're assembling people that are focused on Prabhupada's mission. This is the main idea. We're not so much interested in exposing the activities of other devotees in the ISKCON movement. That movement is pretty much on its own course of activity. And for those that have been around for a long time, like Yaśodā and myself and Balaram, we've seen all of the things go on that have exposed that mission as being deviant to Prabhupada's instructions and teachings. So much so that Balaram was so kind to introduce to us the fact that they were calling Prabhupada's books in Australia Ritvik books. I thought that was extraordinary. I'd never heard that term applied to Prabhupada's scriptures, but in this case, this is the way that they're distorting the philosophy. So we are not here for that purpose, but we are here basically to enthuse each other to carry on with the mission of Lord Chaitanya, again, in our own particular area, and at the same time to gather inspiration from our discussions together as a group of Prabhupada disciples. This is an association. It's not a corporation. Corporation is a much different beast in this material world. But association is meant for specifically helping each other, just like bringing bamboo sticks together. One bamboo stick can be easily broken. Prabhupada gave that example. But when you take a group of bamboo sticks, like a fist, instead of one finger, it's like a fist, or 5 sticks bound together. It has a great deal of strength. So our goal is to unify our efforts moving forward. And we hope that you'll see that as we continue to develop our media team, which is part of our preaching program. We're developing a media team which will help to guide us in our ongoing preaching work globally. Remember, the phone, the internet, these particular tools are very, very powerful because they can reach millions of people, whereas just going out on the street corner and chanting, that's also effective. But in this way, we can reach many, many people. I recently saw a video of someone in the entertainment industry, and how many views did they have? 1 billion. 1 billion views. So as we move forward with our work, we're hoping to increase our numbers through the use of technology and the cooperation of our God brothers and God sisters in this effort. So we'll have the class tonight is being given by Yaśodā-nandana Prabhu. It's on the Caitanya-caritāmṛta verses that we started a few months ago, and we're moving along progressively with. In the unadulterated, unchanged books, that's another key part of what we're doing, is we're using, as Balaram coined it, the Ritvik books that not you've coined, Prabhu, but other people have. We're using the original books in order to study this transcendental knowledge from our Guru A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami. Vinkat, please bring forward the Jaya Radha Madhava prayers, and we'll carry on with the program. Hari Bol.
Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर बनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन ब्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीर बनचारी यमुना तीर बनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय पुष्पात् परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य सत्र सदस्य मौल भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की जय रामाचार्य श्रील हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की जय श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गौ गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय वृंदावन धाम की जय नवद्वीप धाम की जय गंगा माई की जय जमुना माई की जय तुलसी देवी की जय भक्ति देवी की जय स्वामीत भक्तवृंद की जय और
Om Ajnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Namo Mahabhadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gauratvishe Namaham Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhaktarupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhaktashaktikam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Rup Sanatana Bhatta Raghunata Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunata Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. We are reading from Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta, Adi Lila. We'll be reading from text 65 to about 70 or 71. All the synonyms, translations, and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda, Founder-Ācārya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, also known as the Krishna Consciousness Movement. We're reading from the original non-adulterated version, the 1975 original version, on page number 65. Ishwarera avatar itina prakar, amsha avatar argunaya avatar, shaktyavesh avatar tritiya mata, amsha avatar purusha matsyadika yata, Ishwarera of the Supreme Lord, avatar, incarnations, itina, these three, prakara, kinds, amsha avatar, partial incarnations, are, and guna avatar, qualitative incarnations, shakti avesha avatar, empowered incarnations, tritiya, the third, imata, thus, amsha avatar, partial incarnations, purusha, the three purusha incarnations, matsya, the fish incarnation, adhika, and so on, yata, all. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. There are three categories of incarnations of Godhead: partial incarnations, qualitative incarnations, and empowered incarnations. The Purushas and Matsya are examples of partial incarnations. Text 67. Brahma Vishnu Shiva Tina Guna Avatare Gani Shaktyavesh Sanakadi Pritu Vyasa Muni. Brahma, Lord Brahma, Vishnu, Lord Vishnu, Shiva, Lord Shiva, Tina, three, Guna Avatare, among the incarnations controlling the three modes of material nature. Gani, I count. Shakti Avesha, empowered incarnation. Sanaka Adi, the four Kumaras. Pritu, King Pritu. Vyasa Muni, Vyasadeva. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva are qualitative incarnations. Empowered incarnations are those like the Kumaras King Prithu, and Mahamuni Vyasa, the compiler of the Vedas. Text 68. Dvi rupayai bhagavanera prakar, eketa prakashahaya artavilas. Dvi rupe, in two forms, hai are, bhagavanera, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prakasha, manifestations, eke, in one, ta, certainly, prakasha, manifestation, I, is, are, in the other, ta, certainly, vilasa, engaged in pastimes. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. The personality of Godhead exhibits himself in two kinds of forms, prakasha and vilasa. Purport by Prabhupada. The Supreme Lord expands his personal forms in two primary categories. The prakasha forms are manifested by Lord Krishna for his pastimes, and their features are exactly like his. When Lord Krishna married 16,000 queens in Dwarka, he did so in 16,000 prakasha expansions. Similarly, during the rasa dance, he expended himself in identical prakasha forms to dance beside each and every gopi simultaneously. When the Lord manifests his vilas expansions, however, they're all somewhat different in their bodily features. Lord Balarama is the first vilasa expansion of Lord Krishna, and the four-handed Narayana forms in Vaikuntha expand from Balaram. There is no difference between the bodily forms of Sri Krishna and Balarama, except that their bodily colors are different. Similarly, Sri Narayana in Vaikuntha has four hands, whereas Krishna has only two. The expansions of the Lord who manifest such bodily differences are known as Vilasa Vigrahas. Text 6970. Ekai Vigraha Yadiyai Bahurupa Ahare Tabeda Nahi Ekaswarupa Mahishi Vivahe Jaise Kailaras Ya ke karye Krishnera Mukhya Prakash. Ekai, the same one. Vigraha, person. Yadi, if. I, becomes. Bahurupa, many forms. Akare, in appearance. Ta, certainly. Bheda, difference. Nahi, there is not. Ekai, one. Swarupa, identity. Mahishi, with the queens of Dwarka. Vivahe, in the marriage. Yaeche, in a similar way. Kaila, he did. Rasa dance. Ihake, this. Kahiye, I say. Krishnera, of Krishna. Mukhya, principle. Prakasha, manifested forms. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. When the personality of Godhead expends himself in many forms, all non-different in their features, as Lord Krishna did when he married 16,000 queens, and when he performed the rasa dance, such forms of the Lord are called manifested forms. Text 71. Chitram batetadekena vapusha yugapat pratak grihishu dvyashta sahasram sriya eka udavahat. Chitram, wonderful. Bata, oh. Etat, this. Ekena, with one. Vapusha, form. Yugapat, simultaneously. Pratak, separately. Griheshu, in the houses, Dviasta Sahasram, 16,000, Striyaha, all the queens, Ekaha, the one, Sri Krishna, Udavahat, married. Translation by Prabhupada. It is astounding that Lord Sri Krishna, who is one without a second, expanded himself in 16,000 similar forms to marry 16,000 queens in their respective homes. Purport. This verse is from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:69-2. Ratsotsava sampravrittu gopi mandala manditaha yogeshvarena krishnena tasam madhye dvayordvayoho rasa utsavaha, the festival of the rasa dance, sampravrittaha, was begun, gopi mandala, by groups of gopis, manditaha, decorated, yoga ishvarena, by the master of all mystic powers, krishnena, by Lord Krishna, tasam, of them, madhye, in the middle, dvayoho, of each two. Translation by Prabhupada. When Lord Krishna, surrounded by groups of coward girls, began the festivities of the rasa dance, the Lord of all mystic powers placed himself between each two girls. Purport. This verse is also quoted from Srimad Bhagavatam 10:33-3. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, who has opened our eyes, from the darkness of ignorance with the torchlight of transcendental knowledge. Srila Prabhupada often referred to the Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta as the postgraduate study of spiritual science. And here we see, as we see the description by Krishnadas Kaviraj of the various forms of Krishna, there's a lot of detail. Similarly, in the writings of Sri Sanatana Goswami, in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, he gives a very detailed, exhaustive, thorough explanation of all the different incarnations, the explanations of Krishna's position as the original personality of Godhead, the various avatars and their position. It's important to note that in North India, amongst the three major sampradayas, the Gaudiya Sampradaya, the Nimbarka Sampradaya, Vishnu Swami Sampradaya, and also the Vallabha Sampradaya, all of them accept that Lord Krishna is the original personality of Godhead. Krishna tu Bhagavan Swayam. In South India, the Madhvas and Ramanujas, they are of the opinion that Lord Krishna is an avatar of Lord Narayana, of Lord Vishnu. Of course, in our Sampradaya, we accept the authority of Sri Jiva Goswami, who has elaborately described in the Krishna Sandarbha, as well as his commentary on the Brahma Samhita, 5th chapter, the exalted position of Krishna. How Krishna is the origin of all avatars. Now, this is a very technical subject matter, which Srila Prabhupada also describes in many of his purports and books. We had an interesting exchange one time in Udupi with one Swamiji of one of the matas there. And he started to describe how Krishna is an avatar of Vishnu. And we basically objected, saying, no, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, Krishna is the origin of all avatars. Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. So the discussion went on for a little while, but they were not willing to accept. So when we saw Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan a few months later, we discussed with His Divine Grace what had happened. And Prabhupada's reply was, well, because they are in our sampradaya, we should be respectful. And what we should say is that our acharyas, like Jiva Goswami, Sanatan Goswami, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Baladevi Vidyabhushana, they have explained this in considerable detail, and we just follow their path. So Prabhupada was very tactful in his demeanor and his explanation. But when we look at the explanations of Jiva Goswami in his Krishna Sandarbha, he gives so many details, both from a technical Sanskrit perspective, as well as the activities of Krishna, the unique, special activities of Krishna. So this is a very unique feature of the Gaudiya Sampradaya to explain the original position of Lord Krishna. Here we see that Krishnadas Kaviraj starts his explanation with basically 3 different categories of incarnations. He goes on describing the Gunavatars, Shakti Vishavatars, and the 2 basic forms of Krishna, the Prakasha form and the Vilasa form. So this is quite unique in the history of spiritual literature or religious literature, that this sampradaya has the highest depth of explanation, the highest detailed explanation of God and his incarnations. This is a very great, unique feature of this transcendental sampradaya. This is the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as he explained the position of Lord Krishna with his activities with the gopis. We have discussed previously one follower of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu who wrote one of the first commentaries on Srimad Bhagavatam and the Gaudiya Sampradaya. His name was Srinath Chakravarti. And he wrote a commentary called Chaitanya Manjusha. In the beginning of that book, he summarizes the philosophy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Srila Prabhupada used to often quote from that. And one of his statements basically is that Aradhyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayastadhama Vrindavana, that Lord Krishna is worshipable and his abode, Vrindavana, is just as worshipable. Then he goes on, Aradhyo Bhagavan Brajesha Tanayastadhama Vrindavana, Ramya Kaschid Upasana, Vrajavadu Vargena Yakalpita, that the worship of the damsels of Vrindavan is the highest form of worship. Then he goes on, Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam, that the Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest evidence, is the highest literature. Then he further goes and he says, Prema Pumartha Mahan, that love of Godhead is the highest achievement of the human life. Then he finishes his sloka by saying, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matamidam, that in my opinion, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the highest personality, Tatradaro Naparaha, there is no one superior to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So this is the mercy of Srila Prabhupada, who has come to the West to present the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the science of Bhakti Yoga, and present it in such a way, such a simple, practical way that anyone from any part of the world can take up the process of chanting, process of hearing Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita, the process of worshiping Tulsi, the process of associating with devotees and worshiping the deity. These practical applications of the path of Bhakti Yoga were basically kept in India for thousands of years. In our Sampradaya for 500 years, nobody ventured outside of India. But Srila Prabhupada, out of his mercy and his compassion, came risking all personal health and everything. He came and basically brought these teachings. And what we have, the reason we are sitting here today and we have a chance to hear Srimad Caitanya-caritāmṛta and discuss the meaning of these nectarian teachings is because of the kindness of Srila Prabhupada. So we should always remember this whenever we read Srila Prabhupada's books. Vishwakarma Prabhu, you'd like to comment?
Yes, Prabhu, thank you very much for your explanation. I wanted to refer to Sri Namrita, this particular book here. Let me see if, here we go. And to refer to this further to your discussion, because it is said that the name of Krishna and the form of Krishna are also an incarnation of Krishna, a dynamic incarnation of the Lord to deliver people in this Kali Yuga through the chanting. The divine attributes of the holy name. According to Vaishnava wisdom, the holy name of Krishna has extraordinary spiritual potency because the name of God is non-different from God himself. In the material sense, name is different from form. Language is merely representative, symbolic. It does not itself embody the reality it seeks to represent. Recitation of the sound water does not quench our thirst, nor does the calling the name of our beloved invoke the full presence of the beloved. In the divine realm, however, symbol embodies reality. Krishna self-manifests within his sound incarnation, his holy name. The only literary work ascribed to Sri Chaitanya, the 8th verse of Sikshastika, Sri Chaitanya prays, "My Lord, in your holy name, there is all good fortune for the living entity. And therefore you have many names such as Krishna and Govinda, by which you expand yourself. You have invested all your potencies in those names. That the name of God, being non-different from God, manifests all transcendental potencies and attributes is explained in the verse from the Padma Purana. The holy name of Krishna is transcendentally blissful. It bestows all spiritual benedictions, for it is Krishna himself, the reservoir of all pleasure. Krishna's name is complete, and it is the form of all transcendental mellows. It is not a material name under any condition, and it is no less powerful than Krishna himself. Since Krishna's name is not contaminated by the material qualities, there is no question of its being involved with Maya, illusion. Krishna's name is always liberated and spiritual. It is never conditioned by the laws of material nature. This is because the name of Krishna and Krishna himself are identical. So it's a very interesting understanding of the holy name and its benefit for all of us. And I wanted to mention that Prabhupada, when he gave initiation to his disciples, the disciples made an oath, a commitment to him, not really for him, but for themselves, to chant minimum 16 rounds a day. Now, some people have difficulty chanting 16 rounds a day for whatever their situation is. And that, of course, is up to them, what they do, how they manage their time, and carry out this simple instruction from Srila Prabhupada to chant minimum 16 rounds a day. Actually, this particular type of discipline is vital for controlling the mind. It's a discipline that the disciples of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda follow with great focus, because it's the basis of the practice of bhakti yoga, is the chanting of the holy names. I know that I have spoken to some of my godbrothers in the past, and I asked them, how is your rounds making out? And they go, well, I only can chant 1 round a day. Huh. So somehow or other they've adulterated or rationalized their use of time to avoid chanting 16 rounds. This is their right, of course. Do what you can do for yourself. But for us, all of us that want to take up this process seriously, this should be number 1 on our list of things to do every day. Number 1. And after you finish chanting your rounds, then you can do anything you want. That's what Prabhupada said. Now I've finished my rounds. Now you're free to do anything you like. But first and foremost, you have to chant 16 rounds a day minimum. This is something that is très important, very important. And when I go out during the day for my japa walk, I think of different people that are successful. And they're successful because they focus on the discipline that brought them success. For example, there's this famous soccer player in Argentina, I believe it is, named Messi. Now, he is one of the most renowned people in sports in the world. And one very interesting thing about him that I've noticed, he very rarely speaks. He doesn't have any bravado. He's not looking for name and fame. And I'm wondering, how did he do this? Well, he did it because he was focused on his game of soccer. That's how he did it. Whether it's a musician, whether it's a professor, whether it's a cook, whether it is a lawyer, whatever the profession that people are involved in, they're focused. What is our profession? Our profession is self-realization, God consciousness. It is a fixed process that we're trying to apply in our own individual lives. And by doing that, we develop the potency to be able to go out and effectively present Krishna consciousness to others, because we practice what we preach. This is not some kind of show bottle system that you just tell people to chant Hare Krishna and you don't chant yourself. It is very important. It is fundamental to the development of a person's spiritual character. How much should you chant? As much as you can. How will you make advancement? You'll make advancement by how you apply yourself to that process with a sincere desire to listen to the holy name and focus your mind on the sound incarnation of Lord Krishna in this age that has been given by Lord Chaitanya for the delivery of the conditioned souls who are suffering from the illusion that is present in the Kali Yuga. And it is terrible how difficult life can be if you just ignore Krishna and don't take up this process. Yaśodā-nandana, please, if you could speak.
the Hare Krishna movement. Hare Krishna movement means focusing on Krishna and his name to propagate the chanting of the name of Krishna and the teachings of Krishna. At this point, I'd like to open the floor to Garuda Prabhu. He has had his hand up. Please go ahead, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Excellent.
Hare Krishna. My pranams to all of you. And thank you, Yaśodā-nandana ji, for a marvelous reading of verses that are compelling me to share some here. And I ask Vishwakarma ji to shut me down if it gets really boring or uninteresting or just inappropriate, okay? And
Never. Please go ahead.
Seriously, if I'm, please.
Go ahead.
But I'm compelled. I mean, the verses that Yaśodā-nandana ji read, and then what he said, it just like sent shivers up my spine, because my whole devotional life was to do exactly that, Yaśodā-nandana ji. Just let me read to you just a couple of sentences. Rupanuga Prabhu received 100 letters from Prabhupada, and Rupanuga Prabhu himself wrote 101 letters to Srila Prabhupada. In the very last letter that Rupanuga Prabhu wrote to Prabhupada, when Prabhupada was in Vrindavan getting ready to leave in August, and I was in Chicago transiting to Boston. He wrote in the last paragraph in the last letter to Prabhupada, "By now you have received the master's thesis of Garudadas from the University of Chicago." See, I'm just skipping to get to, we are planning his program in order to get him into Harvard, where he can make a name for our society. Blah, blah, blah. He tells a little bit more about me. Our idea, here's the point that Yaśodā-nandana ji just tickled in my mind. Our idea, Rupanuga put it so well, our idea is to establish the pure theism of Lord Chaitanya at Harvard, vanquishing the Christian monopoly on theology. Wow. That defined my whole devotional seva. I mean, that was the whole thing. Prabhupada, of course, had received my thesis. He read it, and he gave me his blessings, which I don't need to go through. But Prabhupada said to Giriraj back in 1969, he said, let's see, he said, "I like the idea that you should make a thorough study of all theological schools. And in the future, if you can explain our Krishna Consciousness movement as the postgraduate presentation of all theological theses, then it will be a great accomplishment." Wow. Okay. Well, I tease Giriraj every once in a while and say, "Look, you never did this. These words were meant for me, not for you." And so because he decided not to continue his schooling, and he joined the ashram. But he said, if you take your postgraduate studies in divinity by comparative study, then in the future we shall be able to present the philosophy of Krishna consciousness in comparison to other theological presentations. So I literally found a doctoral program at Harvard, which I was able to get into somehow by Prabhupada's grace. It's a doctorate in comparative religion. There are very few doctorates like that around, especially in the best schools in the world. I literally went into a program. I was so focused on doing exactly what Prabhupada is saying here, at least to try to do this. So the irony is that I went along working in the doctoral studies in comparative religion, And then it came time for me to write my doctoral dissertation. Well, I had in mind, very innocently, for years, everyone knew, my peers knew that Graham Schweig, it's my legal name, was going to compare the Krishna Bhakti mysticism to the Catholic mystics, like San Juan de la Cruz, Teresa of Avila, Bernard of Clairvaux, Jan van Ruysbroek, some of these, anyway, whatever. It was going to be comparative. So my doctoral advisor had me in his room, and he said, I'm confident that on the Christian side, there's plenty of theological treatment, but I'm worried that on the Vaishnava side, there is not the same kind of balanced treatment. So I'm concerned that Vaishnavism hasn't received the kind of scholarly attention that it deserves. So then he confronted me with the question. He said, what is the highest vision of Chaitanya Vaishnavism? Can you imagine this? I'm put on the spot. What is the highest vision? He said, you can take your time, because I'm sitting there going through rapid fire, Bhagavad Gita, all of the Bhagavatam, Caitanya-caritāmṛta. And I sat back and I said, it would have to be the Rasa Panchadhyayi. It would have to be. Krishnadas Kaviraj calls it the Leela Sara, the essence of all Leelas. Vishwanatha Chakravarti says the Sarva Leela Chudamani, crown jewel of all Leelas. And the only way to appease Mahaprabhu was to read from the Rasa Panchadhyayi. Also, there are other things like Gita Govinda, of course, but the Ras Leela, everything seems to point to the Ras Leela ultimately. He said, well, is there enough theological treatment? Has that been treated in the West by scholars? I said, well, scholars talk about it quite a bit. He said, show me. So I scoured the libraries, and literally nothing has been written about it. And I come back, and I told my professor, and he said, that is your thesis. Now I'm thinking, great. Now I'm going to tell my godbrothers and godsisters, guess what my doctoral dissertation's about? The Ras Leela. I'm thinking, this is the last thing I wanted to parade around the place. And I tried to get out of it. I felt terribly intimidated by the topic. I wanted to do something much more sort of theologically technical, which would have been safe. But little did I know that in the end, it would be the first scholarly book published by a devotee, by at least this devotee, ever in the history of Vaishnavism, by a Western prestigious top publisher, namely Princeton University Press. And this is where Vishwakarma's reading comes in, which again, all these things are driving me crazy. What both of you said tonight. Vishwakarma's talking about the holy name. The conclusion of my book, Dance of Divine Love, published by Princeton in 2005. The conclusion of my book is that the Maha Mantra is but the sonic replication of the Ras Mandala. And I end the book with the Maha Mantra. And this is an academic book. Even the devotees who went into academics were really shocked that I got away with this. And the result is, and this is the good news, that whenever another scholar writes about the Rasa Panchadhyayi, the editors-in-chief of big journals, publishers, Oxford, Yale, they all send the books to me for review to see if they're acceptable interpretations. I did not know I was going to be the gatekeeper in the academic world to make sure. I mean, I've rejected several pieces because they were so offensive. And there were also poorly supported arguments in their work. The last thing I want to say, and I'm sorry, Vishwakarma, do you want to cut me off now? Or I've got one more thing. One more thing. Okay.
Go ahead, please.
Okay. So Yaśodā-nandana ji read in the Caitanya-caritāmṛta that seminal verse in the 5th chapter of the Rasa Panchadhyayi. Rasotsava sampravritta sam gopi mandala banditaha. Absolutely mind-blowing verse. I am presently translating and interpreting the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali for the first time in the history of that book with the Bhakti Vilochana, the Bhakti vision of the Yoga Sutra. And Prabhupada gives me the seeds to grow that vision. And it speaks about the chitta vritti, the turnings within the heart, the chitta vritti. So chitta vritti, you hear the word vritti? Well, the ultimate vritti or vritta is rasotsava sampravritta, the perfect moving forth of the gopi mandala manditaha. This is the ultimate turnings within our heart, is the Ras Mandala. And I'm showing that this is where the Yoga Sutra ultimately wants to go. And and that's what I'm working on presently. Anyway, I've said enough, but I just, Yaśodā-nandana, don't read verses like this in the future that just get me all like, excited and crazy. And same with you, Vishwakarma, if you could try to avoid these, verses that I'm so, just absorbed in, really, I won't have to bore everyone like this again. Okay, I promise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to mention just briefly about the Ras Leela and its relationship to us. The Ras Leela, as you were saying, Professor, it's an area of very delicate discussion amongst the Vaishnavas, very delicate. In fact, for myself, I don't even feel privileged to even mention it. But it brings about a realization that Krishna is inconceivable in his potency. We're infinitesimal in our position. But what Krishna is demonstrating by the Ras Leela is not some kind of material relationship between men and women, but he's demonstrating to all of us that each one of us is capable of having a direct, loving relationship with the Supreme Lord by his inconceivable potency. So depending on the desire of the devotee to serve, depending on their purpose in serving, all the different factors involved in devotional service could possibly bring one to the highest level of a relationship of conjugal humor with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And this is really an encouragement for all of us to move forward in our process of devotional service as humble servants and simply take the holy name as our first and foremost business. Let the chanting be your first and foremost business. And then we can do all the study and all the other aspects of devotional service as a complement to the chanting of the holy names. Yaśodā-nandana, please, if you could comment.
When we study the Krishna book, which is the translation of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, and the way that Srila Prabhupada explains the chapters of the Rasa Leela, there's a lot of detailed explanation that these transcendental pastimes can only be understood if one is on the spiritual platform. In other words, if one tries to understand the activities of the Rasa Leela from an intellectual platform or from a mental speculation platform, it's very difficult to understand, because this is not a mundane pastime of sex activity, of mundane sex activity. This is completely transcendental. I've given the example a few times that when we were in Bangalore in 1972, some Sanskrit Pandit came to see Guru Kripa and myself where we were living and started an argument about the Rasa Leela and various activities of Krishna. So Guru Kripa didn't take very long to defeat him and explain things. So when we saw Srila Prabhupada again in Vrindavan, and we brought that story to Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada's point was, unless somebody understands who is Krishna, who is the personality of Krishna, it is not possible to understand the activities of Krishna, such as the Rasa Leela, what Krishna did in the Mahabharata, and so many other activities. First, they have to understand Krishna. And Srila Prabhupada quoted 3 verses. One was the first verse of the chapter 5 of Brahma Samhita, which I assume everybody on this call knows, Ishvaraha Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha. Prabhupada said, this is number 1. They have to understand what is Krishna's position. He's the source of everything. He's the original Purusha, like that. Number 2, Matta Parataram Nanyat Kinchid Asti Dhananjaya. Chapter 7 of Bhagavad Gita, text 7. There is no truth superior to me. Everything rests upon me like pearls on a thread. Prabhupada said, this is Krishna. Then he finalized and said, Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, text 8. Aham sarvasya prabhavo. That I am the source of everything material and spiritual. Prabhupada said, unless somebody understands this, it is impossible to understand Krishna's activities. Then Prabhupada said, you preach like that. I said, yes, Prabhupada. So this is a very important point. I realized that preaching in the academic world is slightly different than preaching to people in general or preaching in South India. It's a different style of preaching. And it needs somebody to do that, to approach these people with the correct vocabulary, the correct writing, the correct presentation, to make people understand the uniqueness of Krishna and the special position of Krishna in his activities. So it is very welcome that somebody is doing that on the academic level. That is very good. Any other questions or remarks?
I'd like to call upon Dwarkadish Prabhu, who is well known amongst all of us for being in the Gurukula system in the early years of the Sankirtan mission. And Guruda, I think we've seen that picture of him with Prabhupada holding the pen and teaching him how to write. And
I recall that picture, and he looks the same now.
Dwarkadish, could you please give us some beautiful comments from your realizations of a lifetime of service?
Well, I mean, I was just, Krishna filled my desire. I was missing Prabhupada's personal association in Dallas because other kids, I was kind of shy, you know, and so one kid said, oh, Prabhupada touched my head because, you know, he put his Prabhupada shoes on. And I was thinking to myself, what about me? And then I think a part of my heart filled my desire. And then one of the days Prabhupada called we're sitting in rows according to our class number, you know, class divisions. And then Prabhupada said, one of your boys come up. And another boy was starting to stand up. And then I just said, I just like jumped up. I was nervous as anything, but I thought, this is going to be me, you know, Prabhupada's calling for one of us. Yeah, so then I just didn't know how to, you know, anyways, I settled down, and then Prabhupada took my hand and he taught me the first 3 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet. And he said he wanted us to all learn Sanskrit. So I learned how to write the Devanagari script. Learned some Sanskrit slokas. Yaśodā-nandana was one of our teachers in Vrindavan. I had in Dallas we had Hiranya, his name was Hiranyagarbha at the time. Now he's changed his name, reinitiated, but he was a good teacher. And Yaśodā-nandana was he teaches the mantras, Brahma Samhita, Purusha Sukta. Too bad we don't have any recordings of that. That would have been great to hear us after all these years. But I know Prabhupada wanted to train us to preach Krishna consciousness. But at the time I was just a kid, and all this philosophy is just kind of boring, you know. I was just at the time when Prabhupada came to Dallas, I was 12. And, you know, sitting in all the classes, always falling asleep, even in Prabhupada's classes. But I know I got benefit sitting in his classes, even if I fell asleep. And, you know, Prabhupada never would clap his hands, wake people up, because, you know, I think he knew that we were tired. But anyway, yeah, so he was training us. We were supposed to be the future of the movement, you know. Sad that all what happened, and it's just been a lot of painful experiences to process. But I, in one sense, one of the most fortunate devotees, like we all are, who got the actual spiritual mercy to be at his personal presence. So I just say, I look around, you know, there's so many problems people have in the world. So we weren't the only ones going through bad stuff, you know, but as a society, you know, it's pretty bad reflection that the management, the Gurukula system went down that road for so many years. But anyways, I'm here to try to be a humble servant of Prabhupada and get you His Devotees Association. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Thank you very much, Dwarkadish. That was excellent. And we're very happy that you have embraced this group that's focused on Prabhupada's Vani incarnation, the sound incarnation of the pure devotee of Krishna, which comes in many forms: his lectures, his books, and his letters, etc. And from that, we draw great inspiration and understanding on how to push forward. In other words, a lot of people, they live in the past. I used to be this. I used to do that. Do you know who I am? But the fact of the matter is, who are we today? How are we how is this last 24 hours of our day? How did we manage our time? Garuda, could you comment, please? Someone has their microphone on. If Vinkat, could you seem to block that microphone, whatever it is, that person?
Yeah, it's done.
Vinkat, yeah, thank you. Garuda, please make a comment.
I'm not sure what you want me to comment on, but I'm just delighting in hearing your words, and Dwarkadish is in hearing his reflections. It's funny because when he mentioned that Prabhupada was tolerant of many of the children falling asleep because they were tired and so on, I recall a time when in 1974 when we were all at Fogel Ashram, because the temple wasn't built yet. It was the first big Mayapur festival, and Fogel Ashram was down the street, Bhaktivedanta Marg, and Prabhupada's quarters were finished, but not, the building was just columns, bricks, and mortar. So we stayed at Fogel Ashram, and it was dark in the morning. Prabhupada came and gave class. He was sitting there. Most of the devotees were sick, but I managed to stay well because I just drank dab juice and ate bananas. And it was very dark, and there were just about 12 of us at the morning class Prabhupada was giving. So suddenly in the middle of the class, Prabhupada points in my direction and says to Brahmananda, What is he doing? And I'm startled by this. And Brahmananda looks over at me, or in my direction, and says, he is sleeping, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, he is sleeping? He said, yes, he is falling asleep, Prabhupada. He said, tell him to leave. Go over, tell him to go to sleep somewhere else. So Brahmananda is a big, he's a big fellow, even back then, he's large framed. He's walking over to me. I am absolutely out of my mind. And well, it turns out it wasn't I that was falling asleep, although I was convinced I was falling asleep, but just didn't realize it, even though I was glued to every word Prabhupada was saying. It was the person right in front of me to the left, and so that's who we went to. But I still learned from it. It was at that point I said, I will never, ever fall asleep or be inattentive during an exposition on the Bhagavatam. So I still gleaned a lesson from it. Anyway, so the Dwarkadisha's comment about falling asleep made me reminisce.
Excellent.
On that.
I want to thank you for that, by the way, because I just realized I was staying at Fogel Ashram with you.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, I was up on the roof with
oh yes,
Shiva Ram well, not Shiva Ram, it was a Yojapati and another devotee who's now a sannyasi in the Gaudiya Math, who was a friend of mine at the time.
Yeah, I didn't know you then, Vishwakarmaji. I didn't know you until a couple of years later. Yeah, that's right.
But we were there, and thank you for reminding me for that. Yaśodā-nandana, please, if you could comment.
I wanted to redirect the discussion a little bit to that Sanskrit verse that I quoted and Prabhupada's rendering of that verse. This is from the preface of Caitanya-caritāmṛta in the bottom. Prabhupada cites, Lord Chaitanya therefore teaches direct worship of Lord Krishna, who appeared as the foster child of the king of Braja. He also suggests that the place known as Vrindavana is as good as Lord Krishna because there is no difference between the name, quality, form, pastimes, entourage, and paraphernalia of Lord Krishna and Lord Krishna himself. That is the absolute nature of the absolute truth. Lord Chaitanya also recommended that the highest mode of worship in the highest perfectional stage is the method practiced by the damsels of Braja. These damsel, gopis or coward girls, simply loved Krishna without a motive for material or spiritual gain. Chaitanya also recommended Srimad Bhagavatam as the spotless narration of transcendental knowledge. And he pointed out that the highest goal in human life is to develop unalloyed love for Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this is a very, very important verse. Srila Prabhupada quoted numerous parts of that verse in different lectures and other times. I remember one time being in Prabhupada's room, and one gentleman had come to see Srila Prabhupada. This was at the Radha Damodar temple in his room. So he was a Bengali gentleman with a yellow dhoti. He was very tall, long hair with tilak, and it looked like he was trying to imitate Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he comes in Prabhupada's room, he offers his obeisances, and he's talking to Prabhupada. Now, anybody who's ever seen Prabhupada or even videos of Prabhupada conversations, Prabhupada sometime would massage his beads and listen very carefully. So that person kept speaking in Bengali to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada quoted him that verse, that Sanskrit verse explaining Krishna. Afterwards, after a few minutes, this gentleman left, and Prabhupada started to laugh. Prabhupada, just see, he's a Paka Sahajya. He thinks he has become Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Prabhupada laughed. But it's important that Prabhupada quoted him that verse explaining what is Mahaprabhu's teachings in that verse. Yes, Mataji, Andabahya, please enlighten us.
I have no way to do that. I do have, thank you. I have a question that I've had for a very long time, and I thought maybe this is a good forum to ask it. I've asked different people in the movement, and nobody could answer me. Just told me to chant in front of the deity, so that's what I've been doing. And the question is, because we hear it, you know, mentioned in Prabhupada's literatures, that one must follow in the footsteps of the gopis. Can you give any examples of, you know, how Prabhupada might have answered that, or what you have gleaned from studying all of Srila Prabhupada's books, please?
Well, if we study Srila Prabhupada's teachings in his various lectures, conversations, in his books, whenever people try to come up with this idea of basically the topic of Swarup Siddhi, knowing their rasa with Krishna, knowing their relationship with Krishna, Prabhupada's whole attitude is do some service. It will be revealed to you. There's no need of an artificial process. In other words, in order to understand these highly elevated topics of Rasa Lila, of these Krishna's relationship with the gopis, of course, Prabhupada has described this in the Krishna book. But in order to get into that level, one must follow the proper process, become purified, become liberated. Then a lot of these things are revealed. When this is done by an attitude of service and surrender. Now, let me just give an example. Recently, I had a conversation with somebody on this call, and he was adding a discussion with another devotee regarding this class that we're having. This was an older Prabhupada disciple who had been in the movement for many years, and he made a comment that these two, Yasoda and Vishwakarma, or Vishwakarma and Yasoda, are all bogus. They're all nonsense. They're all this, they're all that. I said, okay. He says, because they're preaching something which is all nonsense, and this ridiculous, this is that. And then I had a discussion with another devotee who knew that devotee very well. And we knew that that devotee doesn't follow the process that Prabhupada has given, namely to chant 16 rounds and strictly follow the regulative principles and read his books. Now, it's one thing to make a comment or a cheap political cheap shot. Anybody can do that. But in order to progress in spiritual life, somebody has to follow the instruction and the orders of the spiritual master. That is the first symptom of surrender. That is the first symptom of surrender. This is how we get on the path of properly understanding topics like the Rasa Lila, the various incarnations, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's position, what is the meaning of all these transcendental topics. One cannot expect to understand these things if one neglects the orders and instructions of the Acharya. Now, anybody can make any kind of outlandish accusation. That's fine. They can say what they like. We are following Prabhupada's order, Prabhupada's instructions, specifically with regards to initiations, with regards to not changing his books, following the application of his teachings in so many ways. Just like recently, we've had discussions in these classes that we have come to know. Devotees within the institution have complained to us that some people seem to be inventing new mantras with some kind of gypsy kirtan and wild dancing, and they invented new mantras that Prabhupada never gave. So this is another example of things that one should not do. In other words, there's the vidhi, what one should do, and the nisheda, what things that one should not do. So basically what we are advocating is people should not change the books, should accept Prabhupada as the Acharya. He's the Diksha Guru and Shiksha Guru of everybody in this movement. Why some people do not want to understand that? because of personal ambition. The disease is personal ambition. Profit, adoration, and distinction are the root cause why people do not understand Prabhupada's instruction. Just like Prabhupada wrote a letter in the middle 1970s, he said, if there is any problem in our movement, it means that the instructions of the spiritual masters are being neglected. So how to understand these topics is not very difficult. Submissive hearing and proper following. It's as simple as that. In the Ishopanishad, this is described. Iti Shushrumadiranam. One should heard from the undisturbed personality, the fully realized Acharya. And this is what this whole class is all about. And thank you so much for bringing up that question. It is much appreciated, Mataji.
Yeah, Anandabhaya, I wanted Yaśodā to tell us what was the criticism that he had about myself and Yaśodā-nandana. And the criticism was, all they do is quote Srila Prabhupada. That was the criticism.
Yeah,
This is terrible. This is terrible.
That
my
was the
reaction
fault.
was, let me quote Srila Prabhupada. Let me be on that illusion of quoting Srila Prabhupada and following Srila Prabhupada birth after birth. And let me explain this. One of the six Goswamis, Raghunath Das Goswami, wrote a verse in which he explained his feeling towards Rupa Goswami, the chief disciple of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And he explained, Adadana strinam danter idam yachip punapuna, that I take a clump of grass in my mouth and I humbly bow down at the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami. Srimad Rupa Padam Bhoja, Dhulishyam Janma Janmani. That birth after birth, I wish I can become a piece of dirt at the lotus feet of Rupa Goswami. Simply like that. So this should be our attitude. Not that I'm a big devotee and I'm this and that. That is not the idea here. One cannot progress in spiritual life if he's under the illusion that he's a big devotee, a popular devotee, a big scholarly devotee. No, it doesn't work that way. That is not the process. And there are many other references by great acharyas like Bhaktivedanta Thakur, Ramanujacharya, Yamunacharya, Krishnadas Kaviraj himself, explaining this mentality of service, birth after birth.
Yes, we see many of these big guys in ISKCON now are making these little mini videos, and they rarely ever mention Krishna or Srila Prabhupada. They are quoting themselves and neglecting the orders of the spiritual master. And so I like to point those out sometimes to people. I don't really, when I make a comment under those videos, I say, did this person talk about, did he mention Krishna's name? Did he mention Prabhupada's name? Did he mention a verse in our Bhagavad Gita, our Sri Caitanya-caritāmṛta, our Bhagavatam? No. So if you want to follow this person, that's up to you. You can do that. But I prefer to, listen to what Srila Prabhupada said, and I feel safe that way.
Yes.
Exactly. Just before we have Garuda take the floor, I wanted to mention that in our experience, and I think Garuda Prabhu and all of us in this group do recognize that one of, if not the greatest public speaker that I've ever experienced is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupāda.
Yeah.
He is, I love to hear our God brothers' speeches, and I love to hear the philosophy and be in association. But when you hear Prabhupada speak, it is so profound, so deep, so revealing, so revealing. It's a window into the future for us, that there's hope. When you hear him speak, you see hope, that everything will work out in due course of time if we just listen to his words and follow his instructions. Yashat prashadat bhagavat prasado. This is a prayer we do. It's by his mercy that you'll go back home, back to Godhead. There is no other way. There is no other way. Garuda, please.
Yes.
Please.
Yes. Prabhupada says, speaking a little bit to Anjabhaya's inquiry, Prabhupada says, our Krishna consciousness movement is not a religion. It is a process of purification of the heart. And, what both you and Yaśodā-nandana are saying, that the only way, and it's sad for me to see this in the God brothers or God sisters, the only way we really can be bathing in the grace of Guru and Krishna is by quoting Prabhupada. Not that we just do nothing but quote Prabhupada. In fact, so much of what Yaśodā-nandana ji said this evening was beautiful, but it was infused with serving Prabhupada's Vani. You read from the books that are not changed by any of us, but what Prabhupada gifted to us. If I give you a gift and you decide, well, I'd like to, it's a nice sweater, but I'm going to dye it a different color. You don't thank me. The way you receive a gift is graciously. Well, there's no greater gift than what Prabhupada gives us. And just a few points to the issue that Mataji raised. Therefore, the intelligence is that we should again go back to God, go back home, go back to Krishna, and dance with him in his rasa dance. He likes every part and parcel of his different potencies to take part in the blissful rasa, because participation with the Lord in his eternal Ras Lila is the highest living condition, perfect in spiritual bliss and eternal knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-4. Now listen to this one. And this is a Srimad Bhagavatam lecture in New Delhi, 1973. Why we are hankering after loving. Such beautiful words. Because there is love in Krishna. We are worshiping here Radha Krishna. Originally, there is love. Therefore, we, being part and parcel of God, we are also trying to love. A man is trying to love another woman. A woman is trying to love another man. This is natural. This is not artificial. And then he goes on and talks about how it can get perverted, though, but when directed to Krishna, it is perfect. So the Ras Lila, the Gopi Bhava, and I love what Yaśodā-nandana ji said, and the way he represents Prabhupada's, I don't like necessarily the word chastity, but it's the only word I can think of. We don't plunge into this. Now, there are other Vaishnava groups that delight into prematurely going into and sharing outwardly and openly, which is inappropriate and not the example of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. These are things that are in one's private devotional life. And that, yes, as Yaśodā-nandana ji said, we need to evolve toward that. But Mataji, it is about getting to know Krishna, as the verses that Yaśodā-nandana ji quoted, and knowing Krishna, Ishvara Parama Krishna Satchidananda Vigraha, so on. But in knowing Krishna, we love Krishna, and we love the love between Radha and Krishna. And that love is manifested in the embodiment of Mahaprabhu Gauranga. Our whole tradition is about learning how to love, purifying the heart. And that's what we're here to do. And we do that by taking shelter of Prabhupada's every word.
Thank you, Prabhu, very much for your comments. And the class or discussion is now coming to a close. Unfortunately, it's 9:30 Eastern Standard Time here in Canada and America. But we will be moving forward. I wanted to remind everyone that this class was recorded and is being streamed live on Facebook and other mediums, and it is available for others to see that couldn't meet the schedule that we've set, but don't want to miss the classes. We're gradually building our audience of sincere Prabhupada disciples. That is the idea, that we want everyone. When we first started in the movement, Garuda, I think you'll recall, when we preached to others, we were preaching that Prabhupada is our guru, Prabhupada is our spiritual master, and that Prabhupada is our guide back home, back to Godhead. There was nobody else. And in this group, that is our focus. And that is what we present to others. So on Saturday morning, if you're able to attend, 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Bhagavad Gita class. And we're progressing along in the 7th chapter right now. And then also we're reading from the original on Sunday morning at 10 a.m. in the morning. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, the original 1982, or geez, I'm getting so old, I can't remember, 62 version of the Srimad Bhagavatam, unadulterated, unchanged, unedited version of Srimad Bhagavatam. That's also a very ecstatic presentation. And furthermore, we'll be developing, as time goes on, our channel, Prabhupada TV. You can go to Prabhupada TV anytime during the week if you want to refer to any of the classes that we've been recording and preserving online for ourselves right now and for future generations. This is a long-term project that the Prabhupada Disciples Association has started. And as we move forward in the years to come, we will be expanding our service, and we look forward to everyone's participation in this effort to promote the Sankirtan movement of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Venkat Prabhu, please, if you could bring forward the kirtan, let us all chant along Hare Krishna with His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaurabhakta Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaurabhakta Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaurabhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Hare. Let us offer our humble obeisances to all of the assembled Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Vipa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavenibhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.